Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm doing a speed painting, and I wanted to talk about this thing that I've been doing lately, which is focusing on what state of mind I'm in. And I don't know if it'll help, but maybe it will help you too. So there's this thing where I'm very analytical, and I've mentioned this before, and so when I draw, a lot of thinking goes into it, and it's not exactly a good thing because the more I think, the more I'm overwhelmed with these thoughts. And it's hard to be creative because when I'm putting something down, instead of just being free and like drawing a face, I'd be thinking, well, what's the proportions or something like this. And I mean, to be honest, it's not really there with faces, and that's simply because I've drawn faces so much that I don't need to worry about it too much. It's become automatic. But with other things, figures and things, it's still there where I have to think, well, what's this figure doing and what's the pose and how do I do that, and thinking about the anatomy and just this overwhelming analysis and thought process, which, again, as I said, it's not very good. And the people I used to think of as more talented, they seem to not get bogged down in this thinking. Now, the good thing is, of course, you don't get bogged down in your thinking, so you produce better work. The bad side of that is that if someone asks you to explain how you're doing what you're doing or what exactly you're doing, it's very hard because chances are you're not fully aware of what you're doing yourself. Um, and so I thought, well, okay, maybe I can think my way out of this problem of thinking too much. And my solution was to actually think about other things I did. And one of the things I've been doing lately is writing. And writing is something that I used to do when I was very young, but it was very easy for me. Um, I mean, drawing was kind of easy for me, but it was something that I never had a very good visual library or memory. Like I've mentioned it before, I have trouble with faces, and remember if I try and imagine what someone's face looks like, I really can't do it. Um, but if I've drawn them before, I can remember the movements of my hand when I was drawing them, and so I could probably draw them again. But if I just try and envision anything in my mind, I just see, like when I close my eyes and try and imagine something, I just see black. That's it. That's that's all I see. Um, so with writing, I never did that. I just wrote, and it felt like something that was easy. And I noticed it was the same thing with music, with composition, because I used to try to compose music, and again, it was very easy, and I didn't overthink anything because I didn't know enough. I didn't know what I was doing. I just would hear music in my mind. I'd hear melodies, and then I'd hear counterpoint and things, and it's like, okay, um, just put that down. And and so I started to think, could I do that with art then? And is that possible? Is that something that is doable? Um, where you can just sort of draw without thinking. And I think it's something where it's like, yeah, I've done that. I've done that before where I've drawn without thinking and it's turned out okay. But it always felt like I wasn't in control and that I wouldn't be able to replicate it. And then I started to think from another viewpoint, which is, why is it that whenever I look at other people's work, I can see so many problems and I know how to fix it? And then when I look at my own, I don't see those problems. And so start to think, well, okay. And I've mentioned this in a video before about, I think it's the artist block video. I talk about skills in your hand and your eye, where the hand is basically how well you are able to draw, and then the eye skill is how good you are at seeing what's wrong in your own drawing or other people's drawing. And so what happens is, oftentimes as you improve in art, your hand skills improving, but your eye skills improving at an even higher rate. And so you don't even think you're that good. In fact, some people think they're even getting worse. And it's just because their eye skill is developing so much faster than their hand skill. And so I thought, okay, well, can I use that to my advantage? And so what I've started to do recently, and it's been working, is to constantly switch my focus. So when I'm drawing, instead of getting lost in the drawing, which happens, I mean, I still get caught up in formulas and guidelines and everything like that, but I start to think, or there's a part of me that just thinks in terms of like what looks cool as if I was looking at someone else's work. And so it's almost like you draw a little bit and then you stop and evaluate it as if it was someone else's picture and think like, oh, does that look cool? And what I found is when I was looking at my own work, it looked so stiff. It was like, wow, that arm looks stiff. But then immediately I would treat it as if it was someone else's work that I was just critiquing. And so I would say, well, what would you do differently? It's like, oh, well, if I was doing that, I would make that arm more curved like this. And it's like, okay. And then I switch back to the drawing thing and I fix that thing. I correct whatever I was doing. And then I switch back and it's like, okay, evaluate it. Does that look better? It's like, yeah, look, that looks better. And then you could do this with this area. And it's like, okay. So then I switch. So I think for a lot of people who are just more natural with art, they don't have to do this because they're sort of always in that mode. But for someone like me who's just caught up in this analytical way of thinking, it's sort of a cheat to get out of that. And I think in some ways maybe the more I do this, the less I'll need to consciously focus on switching. So I don't know if that will help other people. It certainly is helping me. And it's just this thing of, looking at your drawing and then, and I do it every few seconds where I just, draw something and then evaluate it. Is that cool? Is that cool? Like, that's what I'm asking myself. Maybe later on I'll be asking myself other questions. Once I get that, is that cool or is that right down? Maybe I'll ask myself, does that make sense? Or is this helping the story or something else? But right now it's all about, is that cool or does that look right? And if not, what would you do differently? But doing it in a very quick way. So it's like right away. Does that look right? Before you have a chance to judge yourself or see it as your own work, what would you do differently? Oh, I would change this, I would change that. It's like, okay, and then immediately make those changes. So with this image that I'm doing right now, actually I didn't want to do this image. I wanted to do a drawing to sort of better explain what I'm trying to say right now, because I've been using it with line drawings and it's helping with proportions and things. Now, it's not perfect. It's still the case that, the next day I can see a whole bunch of problems I didn't see. But it is a lot better than it was before. And I also flip my canvas to also keep switching my perspective, switching my focus. So I'm not viewing it like it's necessarily my picture. I'm just viewing it like it's a picture. And it's like, okay, with this picture in front of you, what do you do? And I think it is important, first of all, to have the fundamentals under your belt already, because I don't know how much of this I would be able to do without that. Maybe I could. I don't know. I don't have the ability to experiment with that myself. But yeah, so I was going to do a line drawing, but what I found is that every time I was doing it, I just kept hitting a roadblock. Like, I kept trying to do that switching thing, and probably because I was recording it, I kept, I guess, thinking about what the viewer would be seeing and getting wrapped up in it. And so I thought, you know what? The problem is that I'm coming into this with an expectation. Like, I'm expecting some kind of result. And I want it to be good, and I want to do some. I'm probably going to be sticking with something I'm familiar with. So I thought, okay, well, screw it. If you're getting way too analytical and judgmental because you're doing this line drawing because you expect to be doing good line drawing, then do something else. So then I just started this canvas, and you'll see how in the beginning anyway, you saw I just put down color, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Just put down color. And then from there, I was doing that back and forth analytical thing where I'll look at something and it's like, what's wrong with this? And sometimes it's not that I have an answer on how to fix it. It's just that I see something is wrong. So like even with this part with the arm, it's like, yeah, I see, that's unclear. So it's a case of, well, try this and see if that fixes it. Did that fix it? If the answer is yes, good, move on. If the answer is no, then it's like, okay, why? What's wrong about it? And in a way, through a process of elimination, you can eventually find what works, or at least it's easier. And I do see that, yeah, maybe this is a very specific technique that maybe it's only geared towards me and maybe not other people. But at the same time, if nothing else, I would like to get across the idea that just because you are disadvantaged at something or not as good, or you just think differently, it doesn't mean that has to be what stops you. You can find workarounds to everything. I always felt that I had to find a shortcut because, I don't know, like things like I felt I was lazy, and so I didn't feel like putting in as many hours as some of my peers were putting in. Then I would beat myself up and think like, well, if you're not putting in this many hours, you're not going to be as good, and you're just going to become a failure, and you're not going to be good at art, and look at how much they're improving. And then I started to think, well, okay, what if we accept the fact that I'm a bit more lazy? Then what does that mean? And to me, what the answer was is it meant that, well, if you're going to be lazy and you want to compete with these people, you're going to have to think of, you're going to have to be smarter. You're going to have to think of new ways to advance. You're going to have to break things down and learn in a different way. So, I mean, that's what I've been going on, is not letting some kind of, well, you don't see things in your head stop you. It's like, okay, well, what else? I can do other things. What's a different way of looking at this? So, yeah, I don't know if that helped anyone. I really hope it did. And I hope you like the picture. It's just another intuition type thing. So this is the stuff I like to draw, and I like to keep it very sketchy, and I like to not know exactly what it is, but hopefully at the end it looks cool anyway. Alright, thanks for watching.